Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Mike Quigley, who serves on the Intelligence Committee, is also co-chair of the Congressional Ukraine Caucus. Congressman, you're on Intel. Tell us about what you can share about the readiness, the posture that we have. Do you think that those 8,500 troops are going to be called up and sent into the NATO, largely into the NATO Rapid Response Force?
I hope not, but I think it's important for the following reason. In the end, what is this all about? This isn't about Putin defending Russia's borders. It's expanding those borders. What does he really want? He wants NATO to end, and he wants the United States out of Europe. So I think you have to threaten him with the thing he hates most, the notion that there might be a much greater NATO presence and a U.S. presence within Eastern and Central Bloc European countries. He's never going to be appeased on Eastern Europe. So I think you have to threaten him with a far worse condition.
And threaten him with these troop deployments, threaten him with, all signs that we are ready to respond, that NATO is ready to respond. What about the sanctions? What is he afraid of?
No, I think that the president has done all you can to unify Europe on the sanctions. I think the sanctions, what we've learned from the past is they can't be dribbled in slowly. They can't just impact a few of Putin's closest friends, the oligarchs. They indeed have to be crippling sanctions, which would unfortunately impact his entire country. And we have to have that complete unanimity. It has to include the energy sector, and we know the sacrifice that's involved there. But obviously, freedom isn't without cost, and Ukraine is so critical. And finally, this isn't just about Ukraine. This is about all of Central and Eastern Europe, as our Pole friends know, and the Baltics and so many others.
And, Ukraine is so important to you, obviously, on a large scale, but also at home. You represent such a large Ukrainian-American community in the Ukrainian village in Chicago. Talk to me about what you're hearing from your constituents.
Yeah, there's been several rallies and events recently, and I talked to them. It is extremely difficult to share the concerns they have, to listen to the pain they have, talking to their relatives in Ukraine, the fear that is present. But the extraordinary pride they show and the determination to show the rest of the world that Ukrainians will fight and defend them. And I think we owe it to them, and the fact that they've fought the Russians for 7 years, that they signed the Budapest Memorandum and kept much of the world free from nuclear weapons. We obviously owe Ukraine a great deal. It is tough, but we need to show that we stand with our Ukrainian friends, not just because of our heart, but because of our brain. It's the smart thing to do, and it's the right thing to do.
And, they gave up their nuclear weapons when the Soviet Union came down, and that, thanks to Senators Nunn and Lugar, meant that they dismantled those, dangerous weapons. But the U.S. has no commitment to put in strategic weapons. That's something that, Russia is demanding. Can we negotiate with Russia again in the draft responses that we're sending this week without making concessions that endanger Ukraine?
Sure, but I think any kind of negotiations, when you talk about arms control and nukes, that's all fine, and it's fair game, and I'd like to be at the table because I think it's important. But it clearly doesn't come at the barrel of a gun. When you've flanked Ukraine on three sides, in 2008, you invaded Georgia, and they've already, invaded Crimea, and there's a war in the east already that exists in Ukraine. So if Putin is serious about this, it's time to withdraw and come to the table and talk about how to reasonably come to terms with any threats you might feel that exist. But I think the opposite has to happen if he continues his actions now, not just those crippling sanctions, but also the forced posturing in Eastern Europe. And I'll add one more thing. Outside of Ukraine and Eastern Europe, we have to be aware that Beijing is watching with an eye on Taiwan. So I think this is a worldwide issue, and I don't think the U.S. is immune from the concerns of Putin's militant actions.
Well, thank you, Congressman. Thanks very much. We have to leave it there. Chuck Todd and MTV Daily start right after this.